It was nearly 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the middle-aged woman drove her Chevrolet Tahoe through the Georgia woods. A black case secured with electronic locks sat on the rear seat. 5 police vehicles suddenly closed in. 1 blocked the front, 1 pressed along the driver's side, and 3 sealed off the rear, forcing the Tahoe onto the shoulder. Sirens blared. The phone on the dashboard immediately lost its signal. Sheriff Wade Mercer stepped out and knocked hard on the driver's window. The woman lowered it a few inches. "Roll it all the way down," Mercer ordered. "Tell me why I was stopped," she replied. Mercer stared at the case in the back seat. "What's in the case?" "Personal belongings." Mercer gave a signal. A deputy struck the rear window hard with a baton. Mercer leaned toward the narrow opening in the window. "Open the rear hatch. Whatever you're carrying, it's staying in Redwood County this afternoon." The woman kept both hands where Mercer could see them. "What violation am I being detained for?" Mercer paused before answering. "This is an official county investigation. That doesn't tell me why you stopped my vehicle. License, registration, and insurance." She reached slowly toward the center console. "I'm getting my documents." 2 deputies moved closer to the Tahoe. She removed a small wallet, took out her license, registration, and insurance card, then passed them through the opening. Mercer examined the license. Maya Williams, 52 years old, Georgia resident. He barely looked at the registration before returning his attention to the black case. "Where are you headed, Miss Williams?" "South." "Where? Is my destination related to the reason you stopped me?" "It could be." "Then explain how." Mercer did not answer. Maya looked past him. The 5 police vehicles had been positioned carefully enough to prevent her from leaving in any direction. Farther behind them stood a dark county command SUV with a short antenna mounted on the roof. She glanced at her phone again. No service. Before the police vehicles had surrounded her, the phone had been connected. Mercer noticed where she was looking. "Trying to call someone?" "I was checking my signal. Reception is unreliable out here." "It wasn't unreliable before you arrived." Mercer's eyes remained on her for a moment. Maya looked toward the command SUV. His expression changed slightly. That was enough to confirm what she already suspected. The signal loss was not accidental. Mercer handed back her documents. "Let's keep this simple. Open the rear hatch, unlock the case, and let us inspect it. If there's nothing connected to our investigation, you'll be free to continue. Will you put that in writing?" Mercer frowned. "Put what in writing?" "That, if the case contains no county property, I'm free to leave." A deputy standing near the front of the Tahoe looked toward the sheriff. Mercer ignored him. "I'm offering you a chance to cooperate, and I'm asking you to document what you're asking me to cooperate with." His voice became firmer. "Do you consent to a search of this vehicle?" "No, Sheriff. I do not consent." Mercer stepped away from the window. The deputy behind the Tahoe struck the rear glass again with the baton. The window remained intact, but the intention was clear. Maya did not turn around. "If you have lawful authority to search the vehicle," she said, "you don't need my permission." Mercer studied her carefully. She had not raised her voice, attempted to drive away, or refused to provide identification. Each time he increased the pressure, she responded with another direct question. He walked toward the command SUV and removed a radio from his belt. Maya watched him through the side mirror. She could not hear the first part of the conversation, but when Mercer turned slightly, his voice carried across the shoulder. "I found the Tahoe." He listened. Then he looked directly at the black case through the rear window. "The case is still inside." Another pause. Mercer lowered his voice, but Maya could see the change in his posture. Whoever was speaking to him was not asking about a traffic violation. When he returned, the controlled manner he had used earlier was gone. "Open the hatch." "No. Miss Williams, I'm trying to resolve this without making things more difficult." Maya looked at the vehicles surrounding her. "You brought 5 police vehicles to stop 1 Tahoe." Mercer said nothing. "You blocked the road, cut my phone signal, and your deputy has struck my window twice. Nothing about this looks simple." Mercer turned toward one of the deputies. "Get the bypass tool." The deputy went to the rear of a cruiser and opened the trunk. Maya checked the clock on the dashboard. It was shortly after 5. The deputy returned carrying a compact electronic device designed to access vehicle locking systems. Mercer stepped closer again. You're protecting that case very carefully. You seem more interested in it than I am. I asked you what's inside, and I answered, personal belongings. Yes. Mercer looked through the rear window. You expect me to believe that? Maya held his gaze. You haven't accused me of stealing anything. You haven't identified any missing property. You haven't shown me a warrant. You haven't even explained why my vehicle was stopped. Mercer's expression hardened. You don't decide how investigations work in Redwood County. No. But you still have to decide what this investigation is supposed to be. For a moment, nobody spoke. The sirens had been turned off, leaving only the engines of the police vehicles running around them. Maya continued, you knew which vehicle you wanted. You knew where I would be. And the first thing you asked about was the case. Mercer stepped closer. You should think carefully about how difficult you want to make this. I am. Maya glanced toward the deputy holding the bypass device, then back at Mercer. You brought 5 vehicles here to get one case. So the important question isn't why I won't open it. Mercer remained silent. It's why you need it so badly. His face changed again. This time, Maya knew she had reached the subject he wanted to avoid. Mercer stepped away from the window and pointed toward the rear hatch. Open the vehicle. The deputy moved into position with the bypass tool. Maya stayed in the driver's seat and watched through the mirror. She did not reach for the case, and she did not make another attempt to use her phone. Mercer believed he had isolated her before she could contact anyone. He believed the blocked road, the signal jammer, and the 5 police vehicles had given him control of the situation. But his own questions had already revealed why he was there. He had not stopped Maya Williams to investigate a vehicle. He had come for the black case. The deputy with the bypass tool stopped near the rear hatch, waiting for Mercer's instruction. Maya watched him through the mirror, but kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. Mercer remained beside the driver's window. Who gave you the case? Maya looked at him. Why does that matter? It matters because I asked. That isn't a legal reason. Mercer's expression tightened. Are you coming from the county records district? I'm not discussing where I've been. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Maya looked toward the rear of the Tahoe. You still haven't explained what investigation this is connected to. Mercer stepped away from the window and signaled to the deputy holding the bypass device not to proceed yet. Possible theft of county property, he said. What property? That's part of an active investigation. Was anything reported stolen today? Mercer did not answer. Maya continued in the same calm tone. Do you have a description of the missing property? I'm not required to discuss investigative details with you. Then how did you determine that my case might contain it? Another deputy shifted his weight and looked toward Mercer. The sheriff noticed and turned slightly. Everyone stay where you are. The deputy immediately looked away. Mercer leaned toward Maya again. Let me give you some advice. People who cooperate usually get home a lot faster. Maya did not respond to the warning. If you believe the case contains stolen county property, show me the report or the warrant authorizing the search. I don't need your permission to conduct an investigation. I didn't say you did. Mercer held her gaze. Maya continued. I asked what authority you're using to open my vehicle. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Mercer stepped away and made another small hand signal. The cruiser parked behind the Tahoe switched its siren back on. The sound filled the roadside immediately. It was close enough that Maya had to listen carefully to hear Mercer when he spoke. This can stop whenever you decide to cooperate. Maya raised her voice only enough to be heard. Then turn off the siren and explain the basis for the search. Mercer did not respond. The deputy near the rear window struck the glass once with the baton. He did not swing at full force, and the glass remained intact, but the message was clear. Maya looked directly at Mercer. You've already asked me to consent. I refused. Now you're using sirens and threats to change my answer. Mercer moved closer to the window. Nobody threatened you. Your deputy has hit my vehicle 3 times. He's making sure you understand the seriousness of the situation. I understand it very clearly. That answer irritated him more than an argument would have. Mercer turned toward the deputy near the rear cruiser. Kill the siren. The noise stopped. The sudden quiet made the idling engines more noticeable. Mercer lowered his voice. Where are you taking the case? Maya did not answer. Atlanta. Silence. A state office? Maya studied him carefully. That question was different. Mercer had stopped trying to discover what she was carrying. He was trying to learn where it was going. "Why would that concern you?" she asked. Mercer realized what he had revealed and stepped back. "It concerns me because property connected to an investigation may not leave Redwood County." "What property?" Mercer said nothing. Maya nodded slightly. "We're back to the same problem." He turned away before she could say more and walked toward the dark command SUV. One of the deputies followed him for several steps. Mercer pointed toward the Tahoe. "Stay with the vehicle." "Yes, Sheriff." Maya watched through the side mirror as Mercer moved behind the command SUV and lifted his radio. The deputy with the bypass tool remained beside the rear hatch. Another stood near the hood. The others kept their positions around the Tahoe. No one appeared, relaxed. Maya checked the dashboard phone again. Still no service. She looked toward the antenna on the command SUV. The equipment was operating continuously. Whoever had placed the jammer there had expected someone to try calling for help. Mercer turned partly away from the road and spoke into the radio. "Dean, she won't open it." The answer was too quiet for Maya to hear. Mercer lowered his voice. "I know what you said." Another pause. "No, she hasn't called anybody. The blocker is working." Maya's eyes moved to the dashboard. That confirmed it. The signal loss was deliberate. Mercer continued. "She's asking too many questions." The reply came through the radio, still indistinct. Mercer looked toward the Tahoe. "Yes, same case. Black shell, electronic locks." Maya remained still. The sheriff was not guessing. He had been given a description. Mercer listened again, then said, "I'll handle it." He lowered the radio but did not return immediately. Inside the command vehicle, another man sat before a county property map spread across the center console. Captain Dean Rourke had spent most of the afternoon monitoring calls from the sheriff's office and the county records department. A paper cup of coffee sat beside a stack of yellow legal pads. A half-eaten roast beef sandwich remained in its wrapper near the passenger seat. On the tablet in front of him, dozens of parcels were marked in red. Rourke checked the time. The schedule was already slipping. He keyed the radio again. "Wade, listen carefully. I don't care what explanation you put in the report. I don't care whether she signs anything. Get the case." Mercer glanced toward the deputies. "What if she keeps refusing? Then use the county seizure authority. That requires property identification. Write it as suspected county property pending verification." Mercer lowered his voice. "That won't survive review." "It doesn't have to survive review tonight." Mercer said nothing. Rourke looked at the parcel map. "By tomorrow afternoon, the filings will be finished. Once they're recorded, we can deal with challenges later. But if whatever is in that case reaches Atlanta tonight, we may not get tomorrow." Mercer looked back at Maya. "You're sure it's the right vehicle?" "Gray Tahoe. Same route, same time window. Black electronic case. How many more confirmations do you need?" Mercer's hesitation disappeared. Rourke continued. "Get it before sunset." The transmission ended. Mercer stood beside the command SUV for several seconds before walking back toward Maya. This time, he did not ask about her destination. He did not ask about the contents of the case. He stopped beside the driver's window and spoke in a controlled voice. "I'm going to give you one final opportunity. Open the rear hatch and unlock the case voluntarily." Maya looked at him. "And if I refuse? Then the county will take temporary possession of it." "Under what authority?" "Suspected county property." "What property do you suspect is inside?" Mercer's patience ended. "You don't need to know that right now." "I think I do. You're not the one conducting this investigation." Maya glanced toward the 5 police vehicles surrounding her Tahoe, then toward the command SUV. "No," she said. "But I'm beginning to understand what kind of investigation this is." Mercer stared at her. Maya continued before he could interrupt. "You knew my vehicle. You knew the route. You knew there was a black case with electronic locks. You're blocking communications, and you're refusing to identify anything that was actually stolen." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You should stop making assumptions. I'm asking questions. Same difference when someone doesn't know when to stop." Maya let that answer sit between them. Mercer turned toward the deputy holding the bypass tool. "Be ready." The deputy nodded. Mercer then looked back through the window. "Last chance, Miss Williams. Maya's answer came without hesitation. No. Mercer stepped away. The deputy moved toward the rear hatch. 40 miles away. Dean Rourke looked again at the black case marked on his notes, and then at the county map covered in red parcels. To him, the woman in the Tahoe was no longer the problem. The case was. At the Redwood County Operations Office, Dean Rourke sat in front of 2 computer monitors and a county parcel map spread across the desk. More than 600 properties were marked in red. Most followed the same corridor through the western half of the county, where farmland, repair shops, storage yards, and older commercial buildings stood along roads that had changed little in decades. A digital schedule remained open on the second monitor. Redwood Inland Freight Corridor Preliminary Consolidation. The project had not been formally announced to the public, but Mercer, Rourke, and a small group of business partners already knew the planned route. If the development moved forward, new warehouse complexes, truck terminals, distribution centers, and highway connections would follow. Land that had been inexpensive for years could become extremely valuable. The problem was that much of it already belonged to people who did not want to sell. Rourke picked up his coffee, found it cold, and set it down again. For nearly 3 years, Redwood County had been creating ways to change that. Some owners received property liens based on disputed administrative fees. Others faced towing charges they could not understand, storage penalties that increased by the day, or county notices requiring costly corrections on short deadlines. A few properties entered tax proceedings after records were changed or payments were delayed inside the county system. No single action appeared large enough to attract immediate attention. Together, they had created a steady flow of distressed property into auctions, settlements, and private sales. The buyers were usually limited liability companies with different names: Pine Ridge Holdings, East Mercer Development, Redwood Logistics Partners, Southern Transit Land Group. On paper, they looked unrelated. Rourke knew better. He opened a spreadsheet and checked the latest transfer list. 27 parcels were scheduled for final recording the next afternoon. More would follow in the same batch. Once the county clerk entered the transfers and the receiving companies recorded the titles, reversing them would become a long legal process. That delay was part of the plan. Mercer did not need every decision to survive forever. He only needed enough time for ownership to move. A desk phone rang. Rourke answered. Operations. A woman's voice came through. Captain, this is Marlene at the clerk's office. We've received another state inquiry. Rourke sat straighter. About what? Parcel transfers. How many? I don't know yet. The request asks us to preserve records related to several companies. Pine Ridge is one of them. Rourke looked at the spreadsheet. Who sent it? State Financial Crimes Division. It's not a freeze order, just a preservation request. Then keep processing the scheduled filings. There was a pause. Captain, if the state is asking us to preserve records, shouldn't we hold the transfers until county council reviews it? No. A preservation request means you preserve records. It does not cancel valid filings. Marlene lowered her voice. She had worked in the clerk's office for more than 20 years and was used to unusual requests, but the number of last-minute property transfers had made her uncomfortable. There are a lot of these, Dean. They've already been reviewed. By who? The county. That's not what I asked. Rourke's expression hardened. Marlene, do your job. Record what has been approved and preserve every page exactly as instructed. She remained silent for a moment. All right. Rourke ended the call before she could ask anything else. Across town, a 71-year-old property owner named Gerald Foster stood at the customer counter in the county administration building, holding a folded notice. He had owned a small equipment storage yard for 34 years. The clerk behind the counter read the document twice. It says there's an unresolved county lien. Gerald shook his head. I paid that fee last spring. Do you have the receipt? He placed a photocopy on the counter. There. The clerk compared the numbers. This should have cleared it. That's what I've been saying for 3 months. I can submit another correction request. Gerald looked tired rather than angry. The auction notice says I have 9 days. I understand. No, ma'am. I don't think anyone does. I've been paying taxes on that place since before half the buildings across the highway were there. Now a computer says I owe money I already paid. The clerk lowered her voice. I'll send this upstairs again. Gerald nodded, folded his papers carefully, and left. Cases like his had become common enough that employees noticed them, but each department saw only part of the process. The towing office handled vehicles. The tax office handled liens. The sheriff's department handled seizures. The clerk recorded transfers. Private companies appeared at auctions. Very few people saw the entire sequence. That was how Mercer's system had lasted. No one had taken Redwood County in one transaction. The properties had moved one filing at a time. In Atlanta, Elaine Porter stood at the end of a conference table inside the State Public Integrity Task Force Operations Room. She was 63, wore reading glasses low on her nose, and had spent most of the afternoon reviewing property records, instead of touching the soup beside her laptop. A large monitor displayed a county map similar to Rourke's. The difference was that Elaine's version included financial links between the shell companies. An analyst enlarged a section of the screen. We've confirmed common banking activity between Pine Ridge Holdings and Southern Transit Land Group. How direct? Elaine asked. Same intermediary account. 3 transfers in the last 6 weeks. Enough for the emergency filing? Not by itself. Elaine looked toward another screen. A countdown had been running since noon. 23 hours. 41 minutes. If the state failed to authenticate the remaining evidence before the deadline, the county could complete the next round of transfers. Another analyst turned from his workstation. We still don't have contact with the Tahoe. GPS? Gone. Cellular? Gone at the same time. Elaine frowned. That doesn't happen by accident. We're checking for interference, but we need another signal before we can prove active suppression. Elaine removed her glasses and looked at the map. And the case? It was still moving. When contact dropped, nobody in the room said Maya Williams's name. Not yet. The case mattered because it was believed to contain the financial material that could connect payments, seized assets, shell companies, and targeted parcels in one verified chain. Without that connection, prosecutors might still prove individual violations, but stopping the entire consolidation scheme would be harder. Elaine looked again at the countdown. If those titles are recorded tomorrow, getting them back could take years. One of the analysts asked, and if the case never reaches us? Elaine put her glasses back on. Then we work with what we have. She paused. But somebody in Redwood County is trying very hard to make sure we never see what's inside it. Back in Redwood, Dean Rourke received another notification from the clerk's database. 3 additional parcel records had been flagged for state preservation. He looked at the time, then reached for his radio. The afternoon was moving faster than he wanted, and the woman on the forest road was becoming more important. With every minute, Mercer failed to open the case. Sheriff Mercer returned to the Tahoe with his radio clipped back to his belt. The deputy holding the bypass tool remained near the rear hatch, but Mercer raised a hand before the man could begin. Step out of the vehicle, Miss Williams. Maya looked at him through the partly lowered window. Am I under arrest? No. Am I free to leave? Mercer hesitated. No. Maya let the answer stand for a moment. So I'm being detained. You're being asked to cooperate with an active county investigation. That wasn't my question. Mercer moved closer to the window. Step out of the vehicle. Maya unfastened her seatbelt and opened the door slowly. She made no sudden movement and did not reach toward the black case. Once outside, she closed the door and stood beside the Tahoe. The 5 police vehicles remained in position. One cruiser blocked the road ahead. Another sat close to the driver's side. 3 more prevented any movement from the rear. A younger deputy stood several yards away holding a stainless steel travel mug. He appeared to be in his mid-30s and had not taken part in striking the Tahoe or pressing Maya to open the case. His nameplate read, Noah Cole. Mercer pointed toward the rear of the vehicle. Cole, help with the forced access. Noah set the travel mug on the hood of a cruiser and looked toward the deputy holding the electronic tool. Sheriff, if we're calling this an administrative seizure, shouldn't we document a second basis before opening the vehicle? Mercer turned toward him. We already have a basis. I mean for the report. If the owner isn't consenting, someone may ask later. Mercer's expression became harder. I'm the basis. Noah gave a small nod. Yes, Sheriff. He did not move toward the Tahoe immediately. Maya noticed the exchange but said nothing. Mercer turned back to her. Miss Williams, I don't want this to become more complicated than it needs to be. Open the rear hatch and let us inspect the case. If it has nothing to do with our investigation, you can be on your way. Put that in writing. Mercer exhaled slowly. We already went through this. Then it should be easy to write down. You're delaying an investigation. I'm asking you to document the condition you just offered. Mercer glanced toward the deputies. Several were listening. His tone became more controlled. Mrs. Williams, I'm giving you a reasonable opportunity to cooperate. It's Miss Williams. Mercer paused. Maya continued. And if I open the case voluntarily, you're saying I leave if you find nothing connected to county property. That's right. Put it in writing. Mercer looked at her for several seconds. No, then I'm not consenting. The deputy near the rear window shifted the baton in his hand, but Mercer did not signal him to strike the glass again. Instead, Mercer lowered his voice. You understand that refusing to cooperate can affect how this gets handled. I've provided my license, registration, and insurance. I pulled over when instructed. I stepped out when you told me to. I'm only refusing a voluntary search. You seem very familiar with procedure. I know what I've agreed to and what I haven't. Mercer studied her again. He still had no clear explanation for why a woman driving alone through Redwood County was asking questions that forced him to define every action. He had expected the number of vehicles, the blocked road, and the loss of phone service to make the decision simple. Maya looked toward the dark command SUV. Her phone remained inside the Tahoe, mounted beside the dashboard. No service still? Mercer asked. I assume you already know the answer. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? The signal disappeared when your vehicle surrounded me. You're on a rural road. So you said. Maya looked toward the short antenna on the command vehicle. Mercer followed her eyes. That equipment belongs to the county. I didn't ask who owns it. He took a step closer. Be careful about making accusations. I haven't accused you of anything. Mercer did not answer. Noah picked up his travel mug and moved toward the command SUV. Where are you going? Mercer asked. To check the power level on the mobile equipment. Dispatch reported a voltage warning earlier. Mercer glanced toward the vehicle. Make it quick. Yes, Sheriff. Noah walked away. Maya watched only long enough to register where he was going. She did not allow her attention to remain on him. Mercer turned back to the deputy with the bypass tool. Stand by. The deputy nodded. 40 miles away, in Atlanta, an analyst enlarged a signal map on the operations room display. Elaine Porter stood behind him with her reading glasses in one hand. What do you have? The Tahoe's cellular connection and GPS feed dropped within the same second. Coverage failure? Unlikely. We checked the carrier maps. That section of road has service. Elaine put her glasses back on. Equipment failure? We'd expect one system to remain active. Both disappeared together. Another analyst turned from the next workstation. We also found short interference spikes on public frequencies around the same location. Elaine looked at the blank position marker where the Tahoe had last transmitted. Can you confirm a jammer? Not yet. We need another clean transmission or a stronger spectrum reading. Elaine checked the countdown on the main screen. A little more than 23 hours remained before the next property consolidation filings were scheduled to become effective. Can we move aviation closer? The operations attorney shook his head. Closer, yes. Intervention, no. Not without confirmation that evidence is being obstructed or that the carrier has triggered the emergency protocol. Elaine looked at him. And if we act anyway? The oversight board will call it unauthorized escalation. Mercer's people have already filed complaints, claiming the task force is operating outside its jurisdiction. Elaine knew what that meant. This investigation was already under review. If the operation failed and the state appeared to have exceeded its authority, Williams' unit could lose jurisdiction over Redwood County entirely. Mercer would not need to defeat the investigation in court. He would only need to keep it from reaching court long enough for the property transfers to be completed. Elaine looked back at the blank signal screen. Keep both aircraft ready. They're on standby. And watch every frequency coming out of that county. The analyst nodded. Back on the roadside, Noah reached the command SUV and crouched beside an exterior equipment panel. Mercer remained focused on Maya. "You've had enough time to reconsider," he said. "My answer hasn't changed. You're willing to let county personnel open the vehicle by force rather than show me what's in one case? I'm willing to let you decide what you're prepared to put your name on." Mercer's expression hardened. Behind him, Noah opened the equipment panel and looked at the power connections inside. Maya saw the movement without turning her head. Mercer believed he controlled the road because he controlled the vehicles, the radios, and the signal jammer. He had not noticed that one of his own deputies had begun paying more attention to the communications equipment than to the woman he had been ordered to watch. Mercer's radio sounded before the deputy with the bypass tool could move any closer to the Tahoe. He looked at the display, then stepped several yards away from Maya before answering. "Mercer," Dean Rourke's voice came through immediately. "We have a problem." Mercer glanced toward the command SUV. Noah was still beside the open equipment panel, apparently checking the communication system. "What happened?" "State preservation requests are hitting the clerk's office. More parcels were flagged in the last 20 minutes. "How many?" "Enough that people are starting to ask questions." Mercer lowered his voice. "A preservation request doesn't stop the transfers." "No, but it tells us they know where to look." Rourke had another screen open in front of him at the operations office. Several properties that had been marked for transfer now carried state review notices. The pattern was too specific to dismiss as coincidence. "They have company names," Rourke said. "They have parcel numbers. Somebody gave them more than general complaints." Mercer looked at the black case through the Tahoe's rear window. "You still think the drive is in there?" "I think that case is the reason the state suddenly knows which records to preserve." Mercer turned farther away from Maya. "If we take it and there's nothing useful inside, we've created a bigger problem. If you let it leave, and the financial records are inside, the whole consolidation could be frozen before tomorrow afternoon." Mercer said nothing. Rourke continued. "The county clerk is scheduled to complete the main filing batch tomorrow. Once the titles are recorded, we have room to fight challenges. Before that, we don't." "How long?" "Less than a day." Mercer looked toward Maya again. She stood beside the driver's door with her hands visible, watching the deputies without speaking. Rourke's voice became firmer. "Wade, stop treating this like a traffic stop. Get the case." Mercer ended the call. When he returned to the Tahoe, Maya noticed the change in his expression. He was no longer trying to persuade her. He had made a decision. "I'm giving you one final opportunity," he said. "Open the rear hatch and unlock the case voluntarily. And, if I refuse, the county will take temporary possession of it." "Under what authority?" "Suspected county property connected to an active investigation." Maya looked at him carefully. "What county property?" "That will be determined after inspection." "So you don't know what you're looking for?" "We have sufficient cause to examine the container." "You've said that several different ways, Sheriff. You still haven't identified anything that was stolen." Mercer stepped closer. "You're not entitled to every detail of an active investigation. I'm entitled to know why you're taking my property. You can challenge the seizure later." Maya's expression remained controlled. "That sounds like you've already decided to seize it before you know what's inside." Mercer did not respond. One of the deputies looked toward the sheriff and then toward the bypass tool. Maya noticed. So did Mercer. He turned to the group. "Everyone here understands the order. The case is being held pending verification." No one answered. Mercer looked directly at the deputy with the device. "You understand?" "Yes, Sheriff." Maya spoke before the deputy could move. "If you force entry, make sure everyone remembers who gave the order." Mercer turned back to her. "You think saying that changes something?" "No. I think remembering it might." For a moment, the only sound came from the engines of the police vehicles. Mercer moved closer to Maya. "You've had several chances to cooperate. I gave you my identification. I followed your instructions. I stepped out of my vehicle. What I haven't done is give you permission to search it. You're delaying county business. I'm asking you to explain county business." Mercer's jaw tightened. Maya glanced toward the dashboard clock through the open driver's door. It was a little after 5. She did not stare at the time for long, but Mercer noticed. "Expecting someone?" "No." "Then why do you keep checking the clock?" Because time matters. To who? Maya looked at him. That seems to be what you're trying to find out. Mercer studied her expression. She had given him no destination, no employer, and no explanation for the case. Yet she had not acted like someone surprised by the roadblock. She seemed more concerned with what Mercer was willing to do than with convincing him to let her leave. That bothered him. He lowered his voice. You know what's in that case? Yes. And you know why somebody might want it. Maya did not answer. Mercer took that silence as confirmation. You think it's important enough to protect? Maya looked past him at the 5 police vehicles surrounding the Tahoe. You brought 5 police vehicles to take it. Mercer said nothing. You blocked the road. You interfered with communications. You asked about the case before you explained a traffic violation. Now you're preparing to open my vehicle under a seizure authority you can't clearly describe. You should be careful what you accuse me of. I'm describing what happened. Mercer moved another step closer. You don't know how this county works. No, Maya said. But I'm learning. His eyes narrowed. She continued in the same calm tone. You knew the vehicle. You knew the route. You knew there would be a black case with electronic locks. Mercer's face remained still, but he stopped interrupting. Maya looked toward the case through the rear glass. So maybe the important question isn't what I'm carrying. Mercer waited. It's what you're afraid is inside. For the first time since the stop began, Mercer looked away from her before answering. He glanced toward the command SUV, then toward the deputy holding the bypass device. Sheriff? The deputy asked. Mercer took a breath. The hesitation lasted only a moment. Proceed. The deputy moved to the rear hatch. Maya remained beside the driver's door. She did not reach for the case or try to stop him. Mercer watched her closely. You're really going to stand there and let us open it? Maya met his eyes. You're the one making that decision. The deputy positioned the bypass tool against the electronic access point near the rear hatch. A small indicator light came on. Mercer looked at the device. Then, at Maya. She remained completely still. That calm irritated him more than resistance would have. He raised his voice so every deputy could hear. Open the vehicle. The electronic bypass tool remained pressed against the rear access panel, while Mercer lifted a hand and stopped the deputy from completing the procedure. Hold it there. The deputy looked at him. Sheriff, I want this documented before we go any further. Mercer removed a small digital recorder from his shirt pocket and switched it on. His tone changed immediately. The anger disappeared, replaced by the measured voice of an officer preparing an official report. At approximately 5:20 in the afternoon, Redwood County deputies conducted an investigative detention of a gray Chevrolet Tahoe, matching the description of a vehicle connected to suspected theft of county property. Maya stood beside the driver's door and listened. Mercer continued. The operator, identified as Maya Williams, refused a lawful request to permit inspection of a secured container visible inside the vehicle. Maya looked at him. What county property was reported stolen? Mercer kept his eyes on the recorder. The driver became uncooperative after deputies requested clarification regarding the contents of the container. I gave you my identification and answered your questions. Mercer stopped the recording. I'm documenting the incident. So document what happened. I am. Then include that I asked what property had been reported stolen, and you didn't identify any. Mercer stared at her, then turned the recorder back on. Based on the circumstances, the container is being temporarily secured for verification under county administrative authority. Maya waited until he finished. What circumstances? Mercer switched off the recorder again. You're doing this on purpose. I'm asking simple questions. You're interfering with my report. No. I'm standing beside my vehicle. One of the deputies looked down, hiding a reaction. Mercer saw it. Cole. Noah had returned from the command SUV and was standing near the rear quarter of the Tahoe, his stainless steel travel mug resting on the roof of a cruiser. Yes, Sheriff. You're the secondary witness. Come over here. Noah approached. Mercer turned the recorder on again. Deputy Cole. Confirm that Miss Williams refused to open the rear compartment voluntarily. Noah glanced at Maya before answering. She declined consent to a search. Mercer lowered the recorder. That's what I said. No, Sheriff. You said she refused a lawful inspection. Mercer's expression tightened. Noah kept his tone respectful. If this gets reviewed later, the wording should be exact. Maya said nothing. Mercer looked at both of them, then restarted the recorder. The driver declined consent to a voluntary inspection due to specific investigative concerns involving possible county property. Redwood County personnel are proceeding under temporary seizure authority. Maya spoke after he finished. What is the specific investigative concern? Mercer ignored her. Who reported the property missing? He turned toward the deputy with the bypass device. Stay ready. What is the incident number? Mercer faced her. You've asked that already, and you still haven't answered it. You are not entitled to confidential investigative information. I'm asking for the number attached to the investigation you say justifies taking my property. Mercer pointed toward the Tahoe. I have a matching vehicle, a matching container, and an operator refusing inspection. A matching vehicle to what report? Mercer did not answer. Noah shifted slightly. Mercer noticed. Something you want to add, Cole? No, Sheriff. Good. He turned away from Maya and began another recording. The secured container is believed to contain materials relevant to an active county investigation. The operator has been advised that temporary possession is required for verification. Maya waited until the recorder clicked off. You haven't advised me how long you plan to keep it. As long as necessary. Where will it be taken? To a secure county facility. Which facility? Mercer's patience was thinning again. You don't need that information right now. Maya nodded once. So you want to seize property you haven't identified, under an investigation you won't name? Then move it to a location you won't disclose. Mercer stepped closer. You think you're building some kind of case against me by repeating everything I say? I think you're building your own record. That stopped him for a moment. Several yards away, Noah looked toward the command SUV. The jammer was still operating. A small status light remained steady on the equipment panel. He checked the distance between himself, Mercer, and the vehicle. Not yet. In Atlanta, Elaine Porter stood beside the operations attorney, while an analyst reviewed the last known telemetry from the Tahoe. We still have no emergency burst? She asked. Nothing. What about interference? The analyst enlarged a spectrum display. We're seeing enough activity to suspect suppression, but not enough to establish who's causing it. Elaine looked at the attorney. What can we authorize? Aircraft can stage closer. They cannot intervene based only on suspected interference. And if evidence is being seized, we need confirmation. Elaine folded her arms. By the time we get perfect confirmation, Mercer may have the case. The attorney understood her frustration, but his answer did not change. If we take over a county roadside detention without a confirmed trigger, Mercer's lawyers will argue the task force manufactured the confrontation. The Oversight Board is already reviewing jurisdiction complaints against Williams' unit. Elaine glanced at the countdown. A little more than 23 hours remained. If the operation fails and the board suspends the unit, Redwood becomes effectively untouchable while those transfers are recorded. That's the risk. Elaine looked at the blank signal marker. Justice has a problem, she said quietly. Doing something correctly often takes longer than doing something wrong. The analyst turned toward her. Both aircraft are fueled and ready. Move them to forward standby. Intervention authority? Not yet. Elaine returned her attention to the map. But the moment we get proof that evidence is being obstructed, I want them airborne. Back on the roadside, Mercer gave the recorder to one of the deputies. Keep that running. He turned to Noah. You'll sign as the second witness. Noah looked toward the Tahoe. For the detention? For the seizure? Noah did not answer immediately. Mercer's voice sharpened. Is there a problem? No, Sheriff. I just want the basis written clearly before I sign anything. Mercer took a step toward him. I have explained the basis. Noah nodded. Then put the suspected property description on the form. Mercer stared at him. There was no description because there had never been a theft report. Writing one now would require inventing details that could later be checked. Maya watched the silence develop between them. Mercer finally turned away. We'll complete the paperwork after we secure the case. Maya spoke calmly. So the seizure happens first, and the justification comes later. Mercer looked back at her. Watch yourself. I'm standing exactly where you told me to stand. He stepped toward the rear hatch. Enough questions. The deputy raised the bypass tool into position again. Noah moved several feet toward the command SUV and picked up his travel mug. Mercer did not stop him this time. His attention was fixed on the black case. Maya watched Noah approach the communications vehicle, then returned her eyes to Mercer before anyone could follow her gaze. The sheriff was preparing a record for what he intended to do next. Noah Cole was preparing something far smaller. He only needed 8 seconds. Noah walked toward the command SUV at a normal pace, carrying his stainless steel travel mug in one hand. He stopped beside the open equipment panel and crouched as if he were checking the power connections Mercer had asked him to inspect earlier. Inside the panel, several cables fed power to the mobile communications system. Noah had already identified the jammer's connection. The problem was timing. Mercer stood near the rear of the Tahoe, watching the deputy prepare the bypass tool. 2 other deputies were positioned nearby. If Noah disconnected the wrong cable or left the panel open too long, someone would notice. He set the travel mug on the ground and reached inside the panel. At the Tahoe, Mercer spoke to Maya. "You've been given every reasonable opportunity to avoid this." Maya stood beside the driver's door. "You've been given every opportunity to explain what you're doing." "I already have." "No. You've changed the explanation several times." Mercer ignored that and looked toward the deputy. "Start the bypass." The deputy placed the electronic tool against the rear access point. Noah pulled the jammer's power connector. The status light went dark. Inside the Tahoe, a hidden communications module immediately detected an open signal path. For the first few seconds, nothing visible happened. Then, a small transmitter concealed behind the dashboard activated and sent an encrypted emergency packet. Noah kept one hand inside the panel and looked toward Mercer. The sheriff was still watching the rear hatch. The transmission continued. Maya noticed a tiny green indicator appear near the lower edge of the dashboard. She did not turn her head toward it. Noah waited until the confirmation pulse completed, then reconnected the cable. The jammer restarted. Its status light returned. The entire interruption had lasted 8 seconds. Noah closed the panel and picked up his travel mug. "Power looks stable now," he called. Mercer glanced over. "Then get back here." "Yes, Sheriff." 40 miles away, an alert sounded inside the Atlanta operations room. An analyst turned toward his monitor. "We have a priority burst." Elaine Porter crossed the room immediately. "From the Tahoe?" "Yes." He opened the encrypted packet. The message appeared in plain text after authentication. "Active detention. Evidence. At risk. Aviation authorized." Elaine read it once. "Confirm the signature." "Already checking." A second analyst leaned toward his screen. "Authentication matches." Elaine looked toward the aviation coordinator. "Launch both aircraft." The coordinator picked up the phone. "Both?" "Both." The order moved quickly. At a forward staging field, 2 helicopter crews received the authorization. Engines started, systems were checked, and rotors began turning. The aircraft carried rescue and communications equipment, including high-powered spotlights and utility recovery gear. No weapons were part of the deployment. Elaine returned to the operations table. "How long to Redwood?" "Depends on the route, but they're moving now. Keep ground units staged outside the immediate scene until we know exactly what Mercer is doing." The attorney beside her nodded. "The emergency burst gives us intervention authority if the evidence is being seized." Elaine looked at the signal map. "Then we finally have what we needed." Back on the roadside, Mercer had no idea that the message had gone through. The deputy working at the rear of the Tahoe looked at the bypass device. "I'm getting access." Mercer moved closer. Maya remained beside the driver's door. "Sheriff," she said. He turned toward her. "Don't open that case." Mercer gave a short laugh. "You've been telling me that for the last 20 minutes. This is the last time I'm going to say it." His expression changed slightly. "Why?" "Because you still have time to call this a mistake." Mercer stepped toward her. "A mistake? You can stop the search. You can document what happened. You can let the vehicle leave. And if I don't?" Maya kept her voice even. "Then it stops being a mistake." Mercer stared at her. "It becomes a choice." He looked toward the black case through the rear window. The deputy beside the hatch waited. "Sheriff?" Mercer did not answer immediately. Noah had returned to the group and stood several feet away. He did not look at Maya. Mercer's radio sounded. It was Rourke. He answered. What? Another preservation notice just hit the clerk's office. Mercer turned away slightly. How many now? More than before. They're moving faster. I'm at the vehicle. Then stop waiting. Mercer lowered his voice. She knows something. Of course she knows something. She has the case. She keeps talking like she expects this to go somewhere. Rourke answered without hesitation. It goes nowhere. If you take the drive before it leaves the county. Mercer looked toward Maya. You're certain it's in there? No. I'm certain we don't survive tomorrow if it is, and you let her keep it. The radio went silent. Mercer stood still for a moment. Maya watched him. You can still stop, she said. He returned the radio to his belt. No. He walked toward the rear of the Tahoe. The deputy had completed the first stage of the bypass. The hatch was still closed, but the lock was no longer fully secured. Mercer placed one hand near the handle. Maya spoke again. If you open that case after everything you've said on this road, you won't be able to claim you didn't understand what you were doing. Mercer looked over his shoulder. You're in no position to warn me. I'm not warning you about me. That answer made him pause. Noah lowered his eyes for a moment, hiding any reaction. Mercer turned back toward the vehicle. Finish it. The deputy completed the bypass sequence. A soft, mechanical click came from the rear hatch. Mercer reached for the handle. Far beyond the trees, the two helicopters were already moving toward Redwood County. The rear hatch released with a soft click. Mercer lifted it slowly, keeping his attention on Maya as if he expected her to make a sudden move. She remained beside the driver's door. The black case sat alone on the rear seat. Mercer reached inside and pulled it toward the open hatch. It was heavier than he expected. He placed it on the cargo floor and examined the two electronic locks. Code, he said. Maya did not move. I'm not giving you one. You've already refused the search. Yes, and now the vehicle is open. That doesn't change my answer. Mercer looked at the deputy holding the bypass device. Can you open this? The deputy examined the locks. Probably. It'll take a minute. Mercer nodded. Maya watched without interfering. Noah stood several yards away with the other deputies. He kept his attention on Mercer and did not look toward the command SUV. The deputy connected the bypass tool to one of the electronic locks. A small light changed from red to amber. Mercer looked at Maya. This is your last chance to tell me what's inside. You already decided you were opening it. I'm asking anyway. Maya's voice remained calm. Then, you'll have your answer in a minute. The first lock released. The deputy moved to the second. Mercer's radio remained quiet. For the first time since the stop began, none of the cruisers had their sirens running. The only sounds came from the idling engines and the electronic device working against the second lock. The light turned green. The deputy stepped back. Both are open. Mercer placed his hands on the case. Maya spoke before he lifted the lid. Sheriff, stop here. He looked over his shoulder. You've said that already. I'm saying it again because this is the point you won't be able to explain away later. Mercer gave her a hard look. You really think you're in a position to tell me what I can explain? No. I think your own recording will do that. His eyes moved briefly toward the deputy holding the digital recorder. Maya continued. You documented that I did not consent. You still haven't identified any stolen property. You still haven't produced a warrant. If you open that case now, you're doing it knowing all of that. Mercer turned back to the case. You should have thought about that before bringing it into Redwood County. He lifted the lid. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Inside were 3 encrypted solid-state drives secured in fitted compartments. Beside them were sealed evidence packets, printed property maps, a compact forensic terminal, and several tamper-evident sleeves marked with state identification numbers. Mercer's expression changed. He picked up one of the packets and read the label. State Public Integrity Task Force. His eyes moved to the next item. Financial evidence restricted. Then to the printed case number. The deputy standing beside him looked from the case to Mercer. Sheriff? Mercer did not answer. Maya reached slowly inside her jacket. Several deputies shifted their attention toward her. My credentials, she said, before anyone could react. She removed a dark credential case, opened it, and held it where Mercer could see. The badge was simple and official. Mercer stared at it. Maya spoke clearly. "Commander Maya Williams, State Tactical Operations Division." Nobody moved. Mercer looked at the badge, then at the evidence case he had just opened. Maya lowered her hand, but kept the credential visible. "I'm transporting protected evidence for the State Public Integrity Task Force." Mercer's face lost some of its color. "You entered my county without notifying my office. I drove on a public road. You were carrying evidence connected to an investigation in my jurisdiction. I was carrying state evidence through Georgia. You set this up." Maya shook her head. "I didn't order 5 police vehicles onto this road." Mercer glanced toward the case. "You knew I'd stop you. I knew there was a possibility someone might interfere with the transfer." "That's the same thing." "No, Sheriff. It isn't." Maya stepped no closer. "You chose the vehicle. You chose the roadblock. You chose the jammer. You chose to open the case after I refused consent and asked you to stop." Mercer looked toward the dark command SUV, then at Noah, then back to Maya. "You can't prove the jammer belongs to me." Maya did not argue. "The equipment is sitting 30 yards away. You don't know what it's being used for. That can be determined later." Her answer made him pause. Maya pointed toward the open case. "What matters right now is that you stop touching state evidence." Mercer's voice hardened again, but the confidence behind it was weaker. "This is still Redwood County." A low sound reached them from beyond the trees. One deputy looked toward the western tree line. The sound grew louder. Mercer turned his head. At first, nothing was visible above the pines. Then the upper branches began to move. 2 helicopters appeared over the tree line. One held higher and farther back. The second approached the clearing at a controlled distance, its rotor wash moving dust across the shoulder without disturbing the Tahoe. The deputies looked upward. Mercer remained beside the open case. A powerful spotlight came on from the lower aircraft and swept across the roadside before settling on the area near the police vehicles. A voice came over an external speaker. "Redwood County units, maintain your positions. State incident coordination is now active." Mercer stepped away from the Tahoe and looked up at the aircraft. "This is unnecessary." Maya remained where she was. "Then make it easy." He turned toward her. "You don't take control of a county scene because you brought helicopters." "No." Maya raised her credential again. "We take control because there is a signed evidence preservation order connected to this investigation." Mercer stared at her. "You expect me to believe that?" "You don't have to believe me." The helicopter speaker activated again. "Sheriff Mercer, state ground personnel are en route. Do not move, remove, or alter any material from the open evidence container." One of the deputies near the rear of the Tahoe stepped back on his own. Another followed. Mercer looked around at his men. No one was moving toward the case anymore. Maya walked to the rear of the Tahoe and stopped several feet away. "Step away from the evidence, Sheriff." Mercer looked at the black case, then at the helicopters overhead. For the first time that afternoon, he followed someone else's instruction. He took one step back. Mercer looked from Maya to the deputies around him, then toward the command SUV. His first reaction was not panic. It was calculation. "Cole," he called. "Shut down the communications equipment and get the county attorney on the radio." Noah stood beside the rear cruiser with his travel mug in one hand. He did not move. Mercer turned toward him. "You heard me." Noah placed the mug on the hood. "Yes, Sheriff." He walked to the command SUV and opened the equipment panel. A few seconds later, the jammer's indicator light went dark. Inside the Tahoe, Maya's dashboard phone immediately recovered a signal. Mercer noticed. He looked at the phone, then at Noah. "Call the attorney." Noah closed the equipment panel and walked back toward the group. Instead of reaching for the county radio, he removed a credential holder from inside his uniform shirt. Mercer watched him open it. Noah's voice remained calm. "State Public Integrity Task Force." The deputies nearest him looked at one another. Mercer did not speak. Noah continued. "I've been assigned to Redwood County for 8 months. Mercer stared at him as if the words had not registered correctly. "Assigned? Undercover." The silence lasted several seconds. Mercer looked at Noah's sheriff's uniform, then at the badge in his hand. "You're telling me you've been working for the state?" "Yes." "For 8 months?" Yes. Mercer's expression tightened. You sat in my briefings. I did. You rode in county vehicles. I did. You had access to internal records. Records you authorized me to access as a deputy. Mercer turned toward Maya. This is entrapment. Maya shook her head. No one forced you to stop the Tahoe. Noah added. No one forced you to activate the jammer either. Mercer looked at him sharply. You don't know who activated that equipment. I watched Captain Rourke order it installed 3 months ago. Mercer stopped speaking. The helicopters continued holding position above the road. Their presence no longer drew much attention. The larger change was happening among the deputies on the ground. Noah was no longer standing with Mercer. He was standing opposite him. One of the deputies near the rear hatch stepped farther away from the evidence case. Mercer noticed that too. You think wearing another badge makes everything you heard admissible? That's for the court to decide, Noah said. Mercer gave a bitter laugh. Then, maybe the court should hear the whole story. It will. Noah's answer was immediate. Maya closed her credential holder. Sheriff, no one here is asking you to argue the case on the roadside. You've already decided what the case is. No. We've collected evidence. There's a difference. Mercer looked toward the open black case. What exactly do you think you have? Maya did not answer. Noah did. Checkpoint directives. Towing rotation records. Internal conversations about delayed lien appeals. Meetings with representatives connected to shell companies. Instructions to change parcel classifications before county auctions. Mercer's face remained controlled, but his attention became fixed on Noah. You recorded meetings? Some. What else? Financial transfers involving contractors tied to county seizures. Mercer glanced at the deputies around him. This is administrative work. You can make anything sound criminal if you remove enough context. Maya responded calmly. Then the records will show the context. Mercer turned back to her. You think one case on a back seat proves a county-wide conspiracy? No. That answer caught him off guard. Maya continued. It doesn't have to. Noah stepped closer to the rear of the Tahoe, careful not to touch the evidence. The task force already has enough to establish that the property system needs to be investigated. What we still need is the complete chain. Mercer said nothing. Noah explained. Payment to parcel. Parcel to lien. Lien to seizure. Seizure to shell company. Mercer's expression changed slightly. Maya saw it. Noah continued. The master backup connects those records in one verified sequence. Mercer looked at the case. It's not in there? Maya did not answer. That was enough. Mercer's eyes moved quickly between Maya and Noah. Where is it? Noah stayed silent. Mercer stepped toward him. Where is the backup? A state helicopter speaker activated before Noah could respond. State ground units approaching from the south. Redwood County personnel remain in place. Mercer looked toward the road. Several unmarked state vehicles appeared beyond the last cruiser and slowed as they entered the clearing. Maya spoke quietly. Sheriff Mercer, step away from your county vehicle and remain where the state investigators can see you. He turned toward her. Am I under arrest? Not at this moment. You are being placed in investigative custody while the evidence preservation order is executed. You expect me to cooperate with that? I expect you to decide how much more you want documented today. Mercer looked around. His own deputies were no longer waiting for his instructions. Noah stood with state credentials visible. Maya remained beside the Tahoe. Ground investigators were arriving. The helicopters maintained the communications link he had tried to cut. Mercer slowly moved away from the cruiser. One of the state investigators approached. Sheriff Mercer, please remain beside this vehicle until counsel is available. Mercer did not resist. His attention stayed on Noah. You were in my office for 8 months. Noah nodded. And you never said a word. I said what the assignment required. Mercer looked at him with open anger now. You think that makes you loyal to something? Noah's expression did not change. Loyalty doesn't mean helping someone hide what other people paid for. Mercer looked away. Maya turned to Noah once the state investigators took control of the roadside perimeter. Luke. Noah checked the secure device a state agent handed him. No direct contact yet. Last confirmed location? Harper Heavy Towing. Maya looked toward the black case. The material inside could prove interference, financial links, and organized manipulation of county records. But without Luke Harper's master backup, hundreds of individual property claims would remain harder to reconstruct. Convicting Mercer was one problem. Giving people their land, vehicles, and businesses back was another. Maya looked at the arriving investigators. Secure everything here. Nobody moves the Tahoe or the case until evidence personnel finish. Noah nodded. And Luke? Maya looked toward the road leading deeper into Redwood County. We find him before Rourke does. The first state vehicles reached the roadside within minutes. Investigators stepped out carrying evidence cases, document bags, and portable communications equipment. No one rushed. The scene was already stable, and Maya wanted it to stay that way. She stood near the open rear hatch while an evidence technician photographed the black case and everything around it. Do not remove anything until the full chain is logged, Maya said. The technician nodded. Understood. Noah stood several yards away, speaking with two investigators about the jammer and the county command SUV. Mercer remained beside his cruiser with a state investigator nearby. He had stopped arguing, but he watched every movement around the Tahoe. Elaine Porter's voice came through Maya's secure radio. Commander, we have the roadside evidence under control? Yes. Then I'm ready to execute. Maya looked toward Noah. He understood immediately and stepped closer. Maya pressed the transmit button. Primary evidence secured. Execute landmark. Across Redwood County, teams that had been waiting for that sentence began moving. At the county records office, two state investigators entered through the main doors and presented a signed preservation order to the senior clerk on duty. Employees looked up from their desks as the investigators asked them to stop processing property transfers until the relevant systems could be copied and reviewed. No one was ordered to the floor. No one was treated as a suspect simply for working there. The investigators focused on the records. A gray-haired clerk named Marlene Davis read the order twice before looking up. You're freezing the transfer queue? Only the listed transactions and related records, the lead investigator said. We need the servers preserved exactly as they are. Marlene looked toward the row of filing stations behind her. I processed some of those. That doesn't make you responsible for how they were created. She lowered her voice. I thought the signatures meant somebody had checked. The investigator gave her a direct answer. That's what we're here to determine. Marlene nodded and called the county IT manager. At the sheriff's impound lot, another team secured the vehicle inventory and stopped all scheduled removals. Tow records were compared against county seizure logs. Within minutes, investigators found several vehicles listed under different internal numbers. At the county clerk's office, an emergency hold reached the recording system before the afternoon batch could be finalized. At two local banks, compliance officers received orders freezing accounts connected to Pine Ridge Holdings, Southern Transit Land Group, and several related companies. At Redwood County's Information Technology Office, specialists began creating forensic copies of county servers before anyone could alter or delete files. Each action was quiet. Each action mattered. Maya listened as confirmations arrived one after another. Records office secured. Impound inventory frozen. Clerk transfer queue on hold. First account freeze confirmed. Noah checked the time. 17 hours and 52 minutes. Maya nodded. Keep the clock visible. Mercer heard him. He looked toward Maya. You think freezing paperwork proves anything? No. Then what exactly are you celebrating? We're not celebrating. Maya looked at the technicians working around the Tahoe. We're preserving what exists before anyone gets a chance to change it. Mercer's eyes moved toward the command SUV. You're treating an entire county government like a crime scene. No, Maya said. We're treating records connected to a court order like records connected to a court order. Mercer gave a short, humorless laugh. You always talk like that. Only when people are listening. That ended the exchange. At the Redwood County Operations Office, Dean Rourke heard the first report before the state team arrived. A dispatcher called him from a secondary line. Captain, state investigators are at the clerk's office. Rourke stood up. How many? I don't know. More vehicles are pulling into the county records building. Another phone rang. He answered it. A man from the impound lot spoke quickly. They've frozen the yard. Rourke looked at the parcel map on his desk. What do you mean frozen? They served an order. Nobody can move anything. Rourke hung up and checked the county network. Several systems showed preservation flags. He tried opening the scheduled property transfer queue. Access restricted. Another alert appeared. Financial hold pending review. Rourke stared at the screen. Operation Landmark had started. He opened a desk drawer and removed a folder containing handwritten account notes and a small storage drive. Then, he looked toward the rear hallway. The main entrance would be the first place investigators covered. The maintenance exit opened onto an access road behind the county building. He did not wait for another call. Rourke left through the back. There was no chase. No siren. He walked quickly to his county SUV, started the engine, and took the service road toward the western end of Redwood County. His destination was Harper Heavy Towing. Luke Harper had the one copy Rourke had never been able to account for, the master backup. At the roadside, Noah received an update on his secure device. Rourke isn't at operations. Maya looked at him. Last confirmed? Less than 10 minutes ago. Vehicle? County. SUV. Tracker? Noah checked. Disconnected. Maya's expression changed. Mercer heard the conversation and looked away too quickly. Maya noticed. She stepped closer to him. Where would Rourke go? Mercer did not answer. Sheriff, I'm not helping you build a case against my own captain. Maya studied him. You don't have to help me. But if Rourke destroys evidence while you're standing here protecting him, that becomes part of your problem too. Mercer's jaw tightened. You think Dean is stupid enough to destroy records after the state moves in? No. Maya looked toward Noah. I think he's smart enough to know which records matter most. Noah understood. Luke. Maya nodded. They moved toward the state command vehicle. Noah opened a secure county map and searched for Harper Heavy Towing. It's on the west side, near the old quarry road. Maya keyed the radio. Elaine, Rourke has left county operations. We believe he may be heading toward Harper Heavy Towing. Elaine answered immediately. Luke was scheduled to hand over the backup tonight. What time? 7:30. Maya checked the clock. Too early for the planned transfer, but not too early for Rourke to interfere. Try Luke now. We already are. A pause followed. Then Elaine returned. No answer. Noah looked at Maya. Could be the jammer. Could be. Maya turned to the aviation coordinator on the secure channel. Keep both aircraft available. They're holding outside the county center. Do not release them. Understood. Mercer watched Maya and Noah preparing to leave the roadside. You really think Harper is going to save you? He asked. Maya stopped. She looked at him without anger. This stopped being about saving us a long time ago. Mercer said nothing. Maya continued. It's about whether the people whose property was taken can prove where it went. She turned away. Noah picked up his old stainless steel travel mug from the cruiser hood and followed her toward the state vehicle. Across Redwood County, investigators were locking down the paper trail one office at a time. But before they could secure the final link, Dean Rourke was already driving toward the man who had kept it. Harper Heavy Towing sat near the western edge of Redwood County, where the paved road narrowed before reaching an abandoned quarry. Luke Harper had owned the yard for more than 3 decades. By early evening, most of his employees had gone home, leaving him alone in the small office beside the equipment lot. An old radio played quietly near the filing cabinet. A cup of coffee sat untouched beside a stack of handwritten invoices, and several cardboard archive boxes were arranged near the desk. Luke checked his watch, then looked through the office window toward the main gate. The state pickup was not due until later. He returned to the desk and opened a waterproof evidence pouch. Inside was a secured storage drive containing the master backup he had spent 19 months building. On the desk beside it were original towing invoices, transfer contracts, parcel maps, and copies of county auction records. Luke had kept both digital and paper copies because he no longer trusted any single system. The sound of the front gate opening made him look up. A county SUV entered the yard. Luke recognized it immediately. Dean Rourke parked near the office and stepped out. Luke closed the evidence pouch. Rourke entered without knocking. You're early, Luke said. For what? Luke studied him. Whatever brought you here. Rourke looked around the office and saw the archive boxes. The state moved on the county. I heard. They froze the impound lots. Luke nodded. They froze accounts too. I heard that as well. Rourke looked at the papers on the desk. You seem unusually calm. I'm 61, Dean. I've learned that getting louder doesn't make a bad situation better. Rourke walked to the window and looked across the towing yard. You gave them records. Luke did not answer. That wasn't a question. Then you don't need an answer. Rourke turned back toward him. For years, Harper Heavy Towing had received county contracts for seized vehicles, abandoned equipment, and disputed property. Luke had accepted the work because it kept his trucks busy and his employees paid. Over time, however, the jobs had changed. Vehicles stayed in storage after owners produced receipts. Equipment disappeared from county lists. Properties connected to towing liens ended up under unfamiliar company names. Luke had eventually begun keeping copies. Rourke pointed toward the evidence pouch. That the backup? Luke remained silent. Rourke reached for the office phone and unplugged it from the wall. Then he took a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. Outside, the electric gate closed. Luke checked his cell phone. No signal. You brought a jammer. I came prepared. What do you want? All of it. Rourke indicated the files. The drive, the paper records, the maps, everything you copied. And after that, you go home. Luke looked at him. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to understand your situation. Rourke walked to one of the archive boxes and opened it. Inside were copies of invoices and county transfer forms. If these originals disappear tonight, the state will spend months trying to reconstruct them. They have other records. Not the chain. Luke said nothing. Rourke picked up a folder. This is what connects the towing seizures to the parcel transfers, isn't it? Luke watched him carefully. You already know the answer. Rourke put the folder back. Then we're going to move everything. To where? Rourke looked through the window toward the equipment yard. A large shipping container stood beside the heavy recovery area. Nearby, an industrial crane was used for lifting damaged trucks, machinery, and storage units. Beyond the back fence was the old quarry lake. Luke understood. You're not taking those records anywhere. Rourke walked to a document shredder near the filing area and placed his hand on the switch. Then I start here. Luke looked at the paper files. Those are copies. Some are, some aren't. Rourke knew enough about the investigation to understand that original signatures, dated invoices, and physical records could matter during authentication. He pointed toward the door, walked to the container. Luke did not move. Rourke switched on the shredder. The motor started. No one needs to get hurt, Rourke said. You walk into the container, and the records go with you. You refuse, and I destroy everything I can reach before the state gets through that gate. Luke looked at the waterproof pouch in his hand. You think putting evidence underwater makes it disappear? I think it creates enough doubt and delay. Luke switched off the old radio. Then he picked up the pouch. I've hauled equipment in this county for 32 years, Dean. I know the difference between moving property and stealing it. Rourke opened the office door. Save the speech. Luke walked outside. Rourke followed with 2 archive boxes. They made several trips between the office and the shipping container. Luke carried the evidence pouch himself and kept it close. Inside the container were metal shelving units and tie-down rails. Rourke placed the paper records near the center. Inside, Luke looked toward the quarry. You plan to put this in the lake. Rourke did not deny it. If those transfers are stopped tomorrow, everything Mercer built starts coming apart. Everything Mercer built? Luke looked at him. You were there, for most of it. Rourke's expression remained controlled. Get inside. Luke stepped into the container. Rourke closed the doors and secured the exterior locking bar. Luke heard him walk away. A few minutes later, the sound of the crane engine started. Inside the container, Luke placed the waterproof evidence pouch between 2 secured boxes so it could not slide. He then checked his phone. Still, no signal. Outside, Rourke positioned the crane and attached the lifting assembly to the container. The machinery moved slowly. The steel floor under Luke shifted as the lifting cables took the weight. At first, the container rose only a few inches. Then, it continued upward. Rourke watched the load indicator and began rotating the crane toward the quarry lake. Miles away, Noah sat beside Maya in a state command vehicle when his secure device registered a brief location update. I have something. Maya turned toward him. Luke's tracker? Last signal came from Harper Heavy Towing. Then, it disappeared. Same pattern as the roadside? Looks like active suppression. Maya picked up the aviation radio. Eagle 1, Eagle 2, divert west. Harper Heavy Towing, Old Quarry Road. Both pilots acknowledged. Minutes later, Maya boarded the lead helicopter with Noah remaining in coordination with the ground teams. As the aircraft approached the property, the towing yard came into view below. Maya immediately saw the crane, then the suspended container. Beyond it was the dark surface of the quarry lake. The pilot looked toward her. We can put a team on the ground. Not yet. The container was already several feet above the yard, and the crane had begun turning toward the water. The pilot looked at the distance between the load and the shoreline. Then how do we stop him? Maya studied the wind direction, the crane's rotation path, 2 heavy flatbed trucks, a stationary earth mover, and the open gravel area on the western side of the yard. We don't fight the machine, she said. She pointed toward the ground below. We take away every place he can move it. The lead helicopter circled once over Harper Heavy Towing while Maya studied the yard through the side window. The shipping container hung several feet above the ground, supported by the crane's lifting cables. Rourke had already begun rotating the boom toward the quarry lake. Maya leaned toward the pilot. Keep us west of the load. I don't want rotor wash touching that container. The pilot adjusted the aircraft's position. Understood. Through her headset, Maya contacted the second helicopter. Eagle 2. Take the higher position on the northeast side. Stay clear of the suspended load. Copy. Below them, Rourke looked up from the crane cabin. He could see both aircraft now. He stopped the crane for several seconds. Maya watched the boom. He's waiting to see what we do. The pilot glanced toward her. Want the ground team moving? Not near the crane yet. The container was stable. Maya wanted to keep it that way. She examined the yard again. Several loose tarps covered equipment near the repair area. 2 heavy flatbed trucks were parked near the eastern fence. A large earth mover sat unused on the western side of the crane. The quarry lake was less than 100 yards behind the property. Rourke moved the crane again. The boom rotated slowly toward the water. Maya keyed the radio. Eagle 1. Move 15 degrees south. Low pass over the equipment area only. Keep the wash away from the load. The helicopter shifted position. Rotor wash moved across the gravel behind the crane. Dust rose around the machinery and loose tarps began moving. Rourke closed the crane cabin windows. The container remained steady. Hold there, Maya said. Eagle 1 maintained position. Rourke continued rotating. Maya watched his line of sight. The dust was reducing visibility around the rear of the crane, but he could still see enough through the front windshield to operate. Eagle 2. Bring up the spotlight. The second helicopter's high-intensity light came on. Maya gave the pilot a precise angle. Do not aim directly at him. Put it across the upper windshield. The light struck the crane cabin from above and to the side. Reflection spread across the glass. Rourke raised one hand to shield his eyes, then lowered a sun visor. The crane slowed again. He still has the external cameras, Maya said. The pilot looked toward the mounted camera near the side of the crane boom. I see it. Maya checked the loose material below. A large canvas tarp had partly separated from the equipment rack. Move us 5 degrees right. The helicopter shifted. Rotor wash caught the loose end of the tarp. It lifted from the rack, moved across the gravel, then rose against the side of the crane. For several seconds, it dropped away. Maya adjusted again. Another 5. The wash pushed the tarp higher. It folded across the external camera housing. Inside the crane cabin, Rourke's monitor lost its image. He looked at the screen, then through the windshield. The spotlight reflection still covered much of his forward view. He shut off the monitor and switched to manual operation. Maya saw his hands return to the controls. He's staying with it. The pilot asked, What's next? We limit the rotation. Maya opened a secure channel to the ground team waiting outside the yard. Recovery 1. Move to the western equipment line. Stay outside the crane's operating radius until I clear you. A heavy equipment specialist answered. Copy, Commander. Maya turned toward Eagle 2. You still have the utility recovery line? Affirmative. I need it delivered to the ground team. Nothing attaches to the container or the boom. Understood. The second helicopter moved toward the open gravel area. away from the crane. A utility cable was lowered to the ground, where the recovery team could reach it safely. 2 specialists secured the line and moved toward the stationary earth mover. Rourke noticed them. He increased the crane's rotation speed slightly. Maya watched the container. "Easy," she said into the radio. "Nobody rushes because he does." The ground team reached the earth mover. Maya had them route the cable through a fixed recovery point behind the crane's safe operating boundary. The purpose was not to pull against the crane. The line would act as a mechanical limit if the rotating base continued toward the lake. Recovery 1. Confirm your position. Secure. Confirm nobody is inside the rotation arc. Clear. Maya looked at the crane. Set the stop. The team tensioned the recovery line. Rourke continued rotating. The boom moved several more degrees. Then the crane's base reached the limit created by the anchored line. The movement stopped. Rourke tried the control again. Nothing changed. He released the control and looked through the cabin window. Maya picked up the external speaker microphone. "Dean, the lake is no longer available to you." Rourke reached for the crane radio. "You interfere with this machine, and you could drop the container. That's why we haven't touched the load. You're putting Harper at risk." "No. You put him in the container." Rourke looked toward the lake. He tried rotating in the opposite direction, then back toward the water. The mechanical limit held. Maya continued. "You still control the crane, Dean. What you don't control anymore is where you can take it." Rourke did not respond. Inside the container, Luke could hear the helicopter rotors and feel small changes in the suspended load. He stayed seated on the steel floor near the secured evidence boxes. The waterproof pouch remained wedged between them. His phone still showed no service. He could not see what was happening outside. He only knew the container had stopped moving toward the lake. Rourke studied the yard. Maya watched him from above. The lake was blocked as an option, but the crane still had another possible path. Near the maintenance area was a concrete service pit deep enough that lowering the container into it could damage the equipment and records inside. Maya followed the direction of the boom. He seized the pit. The pilot looked down. "You're right." Rourke began rotating the crane away from the lake and toward the maintenance area. The mechanical stop did not prevent movement in that direction. Maya checked the 2 heavy flatbed trucks parked near the eastern fence. Recovery 1. I need both flatbeds moved. Where? Side by side. Across the maintenance pit. There was a brief pause. That's tight. I know. Take your time. The first truck started. Rourke saw it moving and understood the plan. He began lowering the boom angle. Maya contacted the second driver. Do not enter until the first truck is square. We are not racing him. The first flatbed backed into position and stopped across half of the concrete pit. The second followed. Rourke watched from the cabin as the remaining open space disappeared. The 2 trucks now formed a broad steel platform above the area where he had intended to lower the container. He stopped moving the crane. Maya switched back to the external speaker. The lake is closed. The pit is covered. Your cameras are blocked, and the yard is being recorded from the air. Rourke stared through the windshield. You think that means I'm finished? No, Maya said. It means your safe options are getting smaller. The crane remained still. Maya looked at the suspended container and then at the service panel near the crane base. Rourke still controlled the machine, for now, but he no longer controlled the yard around it. Rourke shifted in the crane cabin and looked toward the 2 flatbeds covering the maintenance pit. The container still hung several feet above the ground, but every route he had considered was now blocked. Maya watched from the lead helicopter. Recovery 1. Status on the jammer? A technician near the edge of the towing yard answered through the secure channel. We have the source. It's operating from a portable unit inside the maintenance shed. Can you disable it without affecting the crane? Yes. Separate power supply. Do it. 2 technicians entered the shed and disconnected the jammer from its battery system. Within seconds, normal, cellular, and radio signals returned across the yard. Inside the suspended container, Luke's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Service had returned. Before he could place a call, Maya's voice came through. Mr. Harper, this is Maya Williams. Can you hear me? Luke picked up the phone. Loud and clear. Are you all right? I'm fine. The records are secure. Maya looked down at the container. I need information about that crane. Luke gave a brief laugh. I bought it. That was the first light moment anyone had allowed themselves since the container left the ground. Maya continued. Does it have an external maintenance override? Yes. Lower service panel on the right side of the base. Gray cover. 2 latches. Can it lower a suspended load without cabin control? If you put it into maintenance mode. But you need someone who knows the sequence. We have technicians on the ground. Luke shifted inside the container and listened to the tension in the lifting system. Tell them not to cut power. If they kill the crane completely, the brake system locks where it is. Maya relayed the warning. One of the recovery specialists moved toward the crane from outside the operating radius. Rourke saw him. Stay away from my machine, he shouted over the crane radio. Maya answered through the external speaker. No one is entering your cabin, Dean. You touch the controls and Harper is the one who pays for it. Then help us put him down safely. Rourke looked toward the lake, then toward the covered maintenance pit. He said nothing. Maya switched back to Luke. What do we need? There's a red maintenance switch behind the lower panel. Turn it clockwise 1 position, not 2. The technician found the panel. Confirmed. Red switch. Clockwise 1 position, Maya said. The technician turned it. A status light on the crane base changed from green to amber. Inside the cabin, Rourke looked down at his control panel. What did you do? The primary movement controls had gone into limited service mode. Luke continued explaining. Now, there should be a black pressure release lever below the switch. Don't touch it until the flatbeds are centered. Maya looked at the trucks below. Recovery 1. Confirm platform. The first driver answered. Both flatbeds locked. Brakes set. Decks aligned. Confirm nobody underneath. Area clear. Maya checked the container again. It was hanging almost directly above the steel decks. Luke, what happens when we use the release? It lowers slowly if the hydraulic pressure is stable. If it starts drifting, let go. Don't try to correct too fast. Maya relayed the instruction. Rourke grabbed his cabin controls and tried to lift the container higher. Nothing happened. Maintenance mode had limited his input. He hit the radio button. You don't know what you're doing, Maya answered calmly. Luke does. Inside the container, Luke smiled slightly. Tell him I've been fixing his mistakes for years. Maya did not repeat that part. She focused on the technicians. Begin controlled lowering. 2 feet only. The technician pulled the pressure release lever carefully. The crane responded. The container descended. Slowly. No sudden movement. No swing. Maya watched the distance. Hold. The technician released the lever. The container stopped. Luke, I'm good. Maya checked the cables and the position over the flatbeds. Another foot. The container lowered again. Hold. The bottom was now close to the steel decks. Rourke stared through the cabin window. The spotlight had been moved off the glass, allowing him to see clearly again. But that no longer helped him. His controls could not override the maintenance system. Maya gave the final instruction. 6 inches. Slow. The container descended until the bottom made contact with the flatbeds. The lifting cables relaxed slightly. Stop. The technician released the control. The container was down. Maya waited before allowing anyone near it. Recovery 1. Verify full weight transfer. A specialist checked both sides. Weight is on the decks. Load stable. Secure it. Ground crews attached wheel chocks and secondary stabilizing lines. Only after the container could no longer move did Maya authorize them to open the doors. Luke heard the locking bar outside. A moment later, the doors opened. Fresh evening air entered the container. Luke stepped out on his own. No injury. No assistance required. He carried the waterproof evidence pouch in both hands. Noah had arrived with the ground coordination team and approached him. You all right? I've had better evenings. Noah looked at the pouch. And that? Luke raised it slightly. Still intact. Maya's voice came over the radio from above. That's what matters. Luke looked up toward the helicopter. No, Commander. What matters is what it can give back. Maya understood. The backup was not valuable only because it could prove a conspiracy. It could connect individual owners to specific liens, seizures, payments, and transfers. It could help return property, she answered. Then let's make sure it gets where it needs to go. The immediate problem was not over. Rourke had locked the crane cabin from inside. A negotiator approached the machine but stayed several yards away. "Dean, the container is secure. Luke Harper is out. Shut down the crane and come down." Rourke remained seated. "You're arresting me either way." "Yes." "Then what difference does it make?" "It makes a difference whether you leave the cabin on your own." Rourke looked at the controls. The machine no longer responded to him. A technician disconnected the crane's operational control power from the external service panel while leaving ventilation active inside the cabin. Nothing forced Rourke out. Nothing threatened him. He simply no longer had anything left to operate. Several minutes passed. Then the cabin door opened. Rourke stepped onto the access platform and climbed down the ladder. 2 investigators waited at the bottom. No one rushed him. One investigator spoke in a steady voice. "Dean Rourke, you are under arrest for obstruction, conspiracy, unlawful confinement, and attempted destruction of evidence." Rourke looked toward Luke. Luke said nothing. Then Rourke looked up at the 2 helicopters, and finally at the container resting safely on the flatbeds. He had controlled the crane until Maya removed every useful choice around it. Now the machine was still, the witness was safe, and the evidence remained intact. It was before 10 o'clock that night when the master backup left Harper heavy towing under state escort. The physical crisis was over. The deadline was not. They had saved the records, but less than 20 hours remained to make sure the law could stop what those records revealed. By midnight, the conference room in Atlanta had become the center of the investigation. Printed parcel maps covered one wall, yellow legal pads filled the table, and cartons of deli sandwiches sat beside cups of coffee that had gone cold. No one had gone home. Elaine Porter stood beside the evidence team, while a financial examiner connected Luke Harper's master backup to an isolated forensic system. "Original device stays untouched after imaging," Elaine said. The examiner nodded. "We're creating 2 verified copies and calculating hashes now." Maya stood near the main display, watching the countdown that had followed them since the roadside stop. Less than 18 hours remained before the county's consolidation filings were scheduled to become effective. Luke sat nearby with a cup of black coffee. He had already identified the structure of the backup and explained how the records had been organized. The first directory was labeled Parcels. It contained more than 600 property files, each with ownership history, county notices, disputed fees, appraisal changes, and transfer targets. The second directory was labeled Seizures. There were towing records, impound inventories, machinery transfers, vehicle identification numbers, and internal county references. The third was Liens. Elaine opened several files and compared them with records already preserved from Redwood County. Some fees had been entered twice. Others had remained active after payment. In several cases, county corrections had been approved internally, but never entered into the public system. The fourth directory was Payments. That was where the structure became difficult to dismiss. Money from shell companies moved through contractors, consulting accounts, towing payments, and intermediary businesses before reaching people connected to Mercer and Rourke. The final directory was Consolidation. Maya stood behind Elaine as the examiner opened it. Inside was a spreadsheet containing the final transfer schedule. At the top of the file were the words, "Final Consolidation, 6:00 p.m. Elaine removed her reading glasses. "That's the deadline." The examiner nodded. "And the timestamps match the county transfer queue we preserved earlier. Can you authenticate the source?" "Not yet. Give me the linked signatures and the county server copies." Elaine turned to another team. "Get them." The next several hours were spent comparing records. A towing invoice matched a seizure entry. The seizure entry matched a lien. The lien matched a parcel transfer. The parcel transfer matched a payment routed through one of the shell companies. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. By morning, the evidence no longer looked like separate administrative disputes. It looked coordinated. Maya checked the clock. A little more than 8 hours remained. Across the building, Wade Mercer sat in an interview room with his attorney. He had been given coffee and time to consult counsel, but the confidence he had shown on the roadside was gone. Elaine entered carrying a thin folder. Maya remained near the door. Mercer's attorney spoke first. "My client is prepared to discuss cooperation." Elaine sat down. "About what?" Mercer leaned forward. The consortium. The people behind it. I can give you names. Elaine opened the folder and placed a document on the table. One of the principal investors was served before midnight. His accounts are frozen, and his attorney contacted us this morning. Mercer looked at the page. There are others. We know. I can give you the state official who helped keep the zoning review away from outside agencies. Elaine placed a second document beside the first. That official is already cooperating. Mercer looked at his attorney. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, Mercer asked, "How much do you have?" Elaine closed the folder. "Enough that your bargaining position is not what you think it is." Mercer leaned back. Then he looked toward Maya. "This started with that case?" Maya said nothing. Elaine answered, "No." Mercer frowned. "Then, who started it?" Elaine studied him for a moment. "Luke Harper began copying records 19 months ago." Mercer's expression changed immediately. "Luke, yes. He worked with us. He worked for county contracts. He sat in meetings. He signed towing agreements. He made money." Elaine nodded. "That is all true." Mercer shook his head. "He needed those contracts. That was your mistake." Mercer looked at her. Elaine continued, "You mistook dependence for loyalty." The sentence stayed in the room. Mercer looked down at the table. For years, he had assumed that contractors, county employees, business owners, and political partners would remain silent because they benefited from the system or feared losing access to it. Luke had done both. He had accepted the work. Then he had started keeping copies. Elaine stood. "We have a court filing due." Mercer's attorney looked up. "You're leaving? You said your client wanted to cooperate. If he has information we do not already possess, put it in writing." She walked out with Maya. The legal team was waiting. 3 hours remained. The first emergency injunction had already been drafted, but every major claim needed support tied to authenticated evidence. Elaine refused to file anything she could not defend. At just over 2 hours remaining, the forensic examiner confirmed the digital signatures connecting the master backup to county records. At less than 2 hours, financial investigators verified the intermediary accounts. At just over 1 hour, the court accepted the emergency filing. Nobody relaxed. Acceptance was not the same as an order. Maya stood beside Noah as electronic notifications appeared on the main screen. One title office acknowledged the requested hold. Then another. A bank confirmed an expanded freeze. County recording systems were instructed to suspend the listed transactions pending judicial review. 39 minutes remained. Then 21. Then 12. Elaine stood behind the filing specialist without speaking. At 2 minutes before 6, a new message appeared. Court order entered. The specialist opened it. A second confirmation followed from the county recording system. Consolidation recording suspended. Nobody cheered. Elaine removed her glasses and sat down for the first time in several hours. Maya looked at the clock as it reached 6. Noah stood beside her, still holding the same stainless steel travel mug he had carried in Redwood County. "That's it?" he asked. Maya looked at the confirmation on the screen. "That's enough." Nothing dramatic happened when the deadline passed. No sirens sounded, and no helicopters crossed the sky. Hundreds of property transfers simply did not happen. For the people who still legally owned those farms, garages, trucks, yards, and small businesses, that quiet result was the first part of getting something back. 9 months later, the federal courthouse in Atlanta was filled with people whose names had once appeared only as parcel numbers, towing accounts, lien files, and seizure records. Wade Mercer sat at the defense table beside his attorney. He wore a dark suit instead of a sheriff's uniform. Dean Rourke sat several seats away with separate counsel. Behind them, the gallery was filled with adult property owners, contractors, former county employees, and small business owners from Redwood County. Maya Williams sat near the back with Noah Cole and Elaine Porter. The prosecution had already presented the financial records, internal communications, towing documents, county filings, and the master backup Luke Harper had preserved. Mercer had been convicted of racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, wire fraud, property fraud, obstruction, evidence manipulation, and abuse of public authority. Rourke had been convicted separately for obstruction, conspiracy to destroy evidence, unlawful confinement, and financial crimes. The sentencing hearing had now reached the people whose property had been taken. A 72-year-old retired farmer walked slowly to the front of the courtroom. His name was Gerald Foster. Maya recognized it immediately from one of the earliest files reviewed during Operation Landmark. Gerald adjusted the microphone. "My wife and I bought our first 20 acres when I was 28, he said. "We added to it when we could afford to. By the time I retired, we had 90 acres. He looked toward Mercer. "I wasn't asking the county to make me rich. I was asking them to leave alone what I'd already paid for." The courtroom remained silent. Gerald explained how a lien he believed had been paid remained active in the county system. The property was then scheduled for a forced sale connected to one of the shell companies. "If those people in Atlanta had been 2 hours later," he said, "my name might not be on that land anymore." He returned to his seat. Next came a 64-year-old woman who owned a small automotive garage. County officers had seized several pieces of equipment after an administrative dispute. The equipment later appeared in records associated with a private company tied to Mercer's network. A 58-year-old trucking contractor spoke after her. 3 of his vehicles had entered the county impound system and never returned to his business. The stories were different, but the method behind them was the same. Fees became liens. Liens became seizures. Seizures became transfers. The legal language had made each step look ordinary until investigators placed the records beside one another. When the final statement ended, the judge looked at Mercer. "You were entrusted with public authority," she said. "You used that authority to create financial pressure, manipulate county systems, and take property from people who had fewer resources to challenge you." Mercer kept his eyes on the table. The judge continued, "Public office does not transform theft into law. It only makes the betrayal of trust greater." She imposed the sentence. Rourke received his sentence later that afternoon. Neither man argued when court officers instructed them to stand. Maya watched quietly. She had never considered incarceration the final measure of whether Operation Landmark succeeded. That answer was waiting back in Redwood County. Over the following months, a court-supervised recovery program reviewed every property connected to the network. Fraudulent liens were canceled. Vehicle titles were corrected. Cars and trucks still held in county storage were returned to lawful owners. Shell company assets were sold to fund restitution. Property transfers that could legally be reversed went back through the courts. Survey teams returned to land where ownership lines had been disputed. Not every loss could be repaired completely. Some businesses had already closed. Some equipment had been sold years earlier. Some owners accepted financial settlements because returning the original property was no longer possible. But the recovery process forced the system to examine each file individually. Luke Harper cooperated throughout the review. His help did not erase his own role. For years, Harper Heavy Towing had accepted profitable county contracts while vehicles and equipment moved through Mercer's system. Luke admitted that. When investigators asked why he had finally started copying records, he gave them the same answer he had given Maya. "I knew the difference between a tow and a theft." His cooperation reduced his legal exposure, but his company was still required to participate in restitution. No one turned him into a hero. He had simply decided, late but not too late, to stop helping the wrong people. Noah returned to state investigative work. He still carried the same stainless steel travel mug. Elaine Porter moved from prosecution meetings to recovery hearings, where the paperwork was less dramatic but often more important to the people waiting for decisions. Maya returned to her command responsibilities while the State Oversight Board completed its review of the Redwood operation. Several weeks after the sentencing, she and Noah were called into a conference room at state headquarters. An official handed Maya a written decision. Her unit would retain its authority. The review found that the task force had acted within the emergency orders issued during Operation Landmark. Its investigative authority was renewed. Outside the room, Noah looked at her. "You knew they'd clear us?" "No." He seemed surprised. "Then why risk the unit?" Maya looked down at a recovery order she was carrying. Gerald Foster's name appeared near the top. "Because by 6 o'clock the next evening, what happened to those people wouldn't have looked like theft anymore." Noah waited. "It would have looked like paperwork." A few weeks later, shortly before 5 in the afternoon, Maya drove her Chevrolet Tahoe through Redwood County again. She took the same road through the Georgia woods. There were no police vehicles waiting for her, no sirens, no signal jammer. The old checkpoint barriers had been removed. Farther down the road, county workers were taking down a faded seizure notice from a post. Beyond them, a survey crew was placing new boundary markers on land that had recently been restored to its owner. Maya slowed enough to watch them work. Then she continued. She checked the rearview mirror. The rear seat was empty. There was no black case. Mercer had believed that enough signatures, fees, liens, and official seals could make taking someone else's property legal. He had been wrong. Paperwork could record a lie. It could delay the truth and make injustice harder to recognize, but it could not change what had actually happened. Greed could learn the language of the law. It could hide behind forms and titles, but truth created records of its own. Sometimes justice did not arrive through force. Sometimes it arrived because a witness kept copies. An investigator stayed quiet long enough to understand the system. A team refused to abandon the evidence, and a deadline was stopped before ownership changed hands. Maya drove beyond the old checkpoint and continued through the Georgia woods. Behind her, the boundary markers remained where they belonged. This story reminds us that injustice does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it hides behind paperwork, official titles, and rules that seem ordinary. But greed cannot stay hidden forever. When people have the courage to preserve the truth, speak up, and stand together. Real justice is not only about punishing those who abuse power, it is also about restoring what was taken and protecting others from being harmed the same way. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. Your time and support truly mean a lot to our channel. We would also love to hear your thoughts about the way this story was told. Was the pacing clear? Were the characters and events easy to follow? Please leave your honest feedback in the comments so we can continue improving the stories we bring to you. And if you have experienced, witnessed, or heard about a meaningful story involving courage, injustice, loyalty, betrayal, or justice being restored, we invite you to share it with our channel. Your story may inspire a future episode and help remind others that even when the truth is hidden for a long time, it can still find its way into the light. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.